volume was printed. And they don't get to Chaitanya until after about 80, up to page 80. But anyway, when I got the book that's printed recently, reprint, they had a second volume, because the second volume was never published. Nishikant Senyal had written it, but it wasn't published. It had never been published. And the third volume, I don't think he even wrote it. He passed away, sometime in I think the early 40s. He died young. So then I realized that the two volumes I got from the Sri Chaitanya Mat in Calcutta, the Sri Gaudiya Mat in Calcutta, they had edited it. So I said, well, I don't know what changes they've made or what they've done. So I wanted to get the original. So Shraddha checked out and found out, there was a copy in some university library. And so through it, I went to the Philadelphia library and they got it for me. And then we scanned it. And that's when I had the original thing. I was so impressed by how the original binding was there. You see it came from London. You could see it was from some bookseller in London originally. It was in a university library in America. And I saw, the quality of the paper, especially when you compare with Prabhupada's Bhagavatams, they were falling apart. And, because he had no money and he had to do it all by himself, and he was the only writer, the only editor, the only everything, practically. And the typesetting, I know how they did typesetting in those days. They did it by hand. There were little English typesetting by people who didn't know English. They just had, I know because I went to high school in Taiwan and I edited our high school, Taipei American School newspaper. And I had to have it typeset by Chinese typesetters who had little tweezers. And they said type, picking up the letters, and they didn't know English. They just followed along, without even... So Prabhupada, I'm sure, had the same kind of typesetters, the same system. This is even earlier, by hand. No machine to type, linotype machine or anything to set type. And so to get, that volume so perfect, in 1932 in Madras was like really an achievement. I mean, they must have really, really worked hard. Because of course, they were going to London and they wanted to make an impression upon the intellectual elite. That was really their aim. They thought that Krishna consciousness is so high level and sophisticated that only the most educated, cultivated people would be able to appreciate it. And Prabhupada had that expectation too. If you read the preface to the second volume, he was thinking the same way, that the educated people will accept this. And when he came to America, the people who went to him were not what he was expecting. Basically long-haired hippies, And when people began to move into the ashram, Prabhupada did their wash for them. They didn't, you wore a pair of blue jeans for 3 or 4 weeks, and you thought of washing it. Anyway, so that's how Anyway, so this book was so I scanned the original copy because I was looking to see where this word Founderacharya came from. I was, Prabhupada title Founderacharya. When I managed to get from India a good facsimile reprint of the Harmonists. And I found out when I started looking at it that Bhaktisiddhanta didn't have that title. And I thought, wow, where did it come from? He was president, he was acharya, sometimes they had a hyphenated president acharya, but no founder acharya. And then when I saw what their other big English language literature was, the Sri Krishna Chaitanya, got a copy of it. And that's where I discovered that the term founder acharya was used specifically as you might say, the term of art for the Sampradaya acharyas from Madhva, Rupanuga, Ramanuja, Sridhar,
Sri Sampradaya.
Oh yeah, you know, they are. This for these four Sampradaya acharyas, Vishnu, Swami, and Martin, Ramanuja. This was their special title. The four founder. There's a section of the book, the four founder acharyas for the Iron Age. So that led to some other things. Oh, wow, Prabhupada used that. Bhaktisiddhanta never had the title. Anyway, there's a whole thing about it. But that's why I got the book. See, this is what you learn. This is scholarship, right? You become obsessive, compulsive, tracking things down, trying to find books that nobody read to find out where did it come from. You know, like when I didn't see in the Harmonist that Bhaktisiddhanta didn't have the title of founder acharya. If I say he didn't have the title, if it shows up one time, I'm wrong. So I have to read every page, you scan every page to see what his titles are, make a list of them all and so on. This is what you learn in graduate school, right? How to be like that. And then, of course, I discovered in two places, Nishikant Sanyal, in 1930, and again in 1936, refers to Bhaktisiddhanta as founder acharya, although he never officially had that title. And my conclusion is that Bhaktisiddhanta was planning to go to England. As soon as there was a temple there, he was going to go to England and then come to America. That was his plan. And the title was being prepared for him by his disciples, founder acharya. So you see, in the Gaudiya Math, titles were given out to all kinds of devotees all the time. Like Nishikant Sanyal, his initiated name, Professor Sanyal was his Karmi name. His initiated name was Narayan Das. But he was awarded the title Bhakti Sudhakar by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Every year they had a ceremony in which Bhaktisiddhanta gave his disciples titles. And it was a big ceremonial occasion. They called up, praised by Bhaktisiddhanta, other people glorified him, given a garland and awarded a title. It was not like, something comes in the mail and you have that title, It was a big ceremonial occasion. So, I believe that when Bhaktisiddhanta would have gone to the West, that title was already being prepared to offer to him. You never would take a title yourself, somebody would offer it to you. That was the practice. Of course, everybody knew that. Anyway, that was how it was done. That was the etiquette. Even like when Prabhupada got the title Bhaktivedanta, there was a ceremony. So it's very important. And that's why when Prabhupada came to America, nobody knew any etiquette. But when he saw, or became convinced that the movement was established, that's when all of a sudden he becomes founder acharya. And it shows up in the second issue of Back to Godhead magazine, then in the fourth issue, then it disappears for a while, and then when one of Prabhupada's godbrothers begins to preach to Prabhupada's disciples against Prabhupada and reinitiates them, when they went to India, stayed in his ashram, and he, gave them initiation, reinitiated his own disciples. Then Prabhupada said, okay, I'm going to insist on this title, it has to be there. And anyway, that's the history. That's the history of that. Yeah?
He said Sankirtan Sun means together, but it also means the most complete, or the
Yeah. Yeah, the prefix has two meanings.
So what would that mean?
Well, one thing it means that one should chant the holy name. The complete chanting of the holy name has to be there. That means one has to cultivate the holy name and try to chant without offenses. When you cultivate the holy name, we should be going through all the stages of advancement of Nishta, Ruchi, Asakti, and so until Krishna Prema is there. That's Sankirtan too. And that's what the gifts of the holy name, when the holy name is fully revealed, you have a very close relationship with Krishna. That's Sankirtan. That's also. Just doing japa can be Sankirtan in that way. But it also means a group. That's another thing. Both meanings are there.
Can you say something about why ISKCON did not fall apart, whereas the Gaudiya Math fell apart?
Well, it's still a work in progress, I tell you. It's come close a few times, and you notice we have split off groups, bunch of groups that were fixed and this and the other thing. But Prabhupada did something. See, Bhakti Siddhanta, his last night on earth, he gave the order to form a governing body commission with names listed. This should be the governing body commission, with the idea that they would manage the society. Didn't name anybody as the next acharya. But that wasn't followed. Because what happened is that, his name just flew out of my head. This is happening in my old age. Proper names get wings and fly away. Bhakti Siddhanta's general manager for the Gaudiya Math, who had been a householder and was at the Sri Chaitanya Math in Mayapur, took sannyas quickly and then claimed to be the next acharya. There were more spiritual people. He was a very good manager. People were always complaining about him. His name will show up some. You don't remember?
He became the Nanda Tirtha?
Yeah. But his anyway, he was the general manager. People were always complaining about him to Bhakti Siddhanta. They said he was stealing money and that he was a householder. And, anyway, they had many complaints about him, and Bhakti Siddhanta said, I need him, because he was a very, very good manager. So he then took sannyas and claimed to be the next acharya. And the people that thought he was not good enough didn't like that. They decided to go, they took Ananda Vasudeva, Bhakti Siddhanta's secretary, who was apparently very advanced. He was the guy that Bhakti Siddhanta would mention a verse, and he could always quote the verse when Bhakti Siddhanta was lecturing, What is that verse? He'd say, knew the Shastra better than anybody, His secretary, Ananda Vasudeva. So people got behind him and made him the acharya. His headquarters was the Sri Chaitanya, was the Gaudiya Math in Calcutta. And so then you had two main temples, the Sri Chaitanya Math in Mayapur and the Gaudiya Math in Calcutta. That was the big opulent marble temple that Bhakti Siddhanta told our Srila Prabhupada that he was disgusted with it, because they were fighting over who would get which rooms and all that stuff. That was the split between these two competing gurus. So what Prabhupada did is he he formed the GBC early on and had to meet every year in Mayapur. It was very interesting. The first GBC meeting that at least they took notes for, you know. Prabhupada had a secretary to write down resolutions. They used parliamentary procedure. There's a book in the Robert's Rules of Order, which are all the rules that Parliament. Somebody makes a motion, makes a proposal. Somebody else seconds the proposal. There's discussion, and then you vote. And then if the vote is there, it becomes a resolution. So Prabhupada did the exact thing with the GBC when they met the first time. I was, 75 in Mayapur. Was he sat down with him. He raised his hand and voted with him. Just showed him how to do it. And then every year you're going to meet. It's the annual general meeting. You see the word GBC? Governing Body Commission. Like if you're an American, you hear that? We don't have such a phrase. It sounds very British to us. And it turns out the Indian Railways, its governing body, which was all over India, you know, that was the big achievement, the most impressive thing was these railroads connecting all the Indian cities, big Indian cities. Their governing body was called the Governing Body Commission. And you can visit it. Their office is preserved in Westminster in London. You can visit the office of the original Governing Body Commission of the Indian Railways is still preserved in London. So it's a very modernization idea, this GBC. And Bhaktisiddhanta had it, but it was never implemented. Or they did implement it, but it was disregarded, you know, by the other people. So Prabhupada sat down, had somebody take notes. That's the first notes we have in 19. He appointed a GBC earlier, but then in 75 in Mayapur, and said you should meet here every year for your annual general meeting, which something that companies have. So that to me is like the main reason. Because then of course the big controversy came, who's going to be the initiating gurus? But these initiating gurus, whoever they were under the GBC's direction. They weren't independent of the GBC. But then it seemed to people in the beginning, wow, you know, we've got two kind of managing structures. One is the GBC and the other is the gurus, because the gurus had been done with the idea that each had its zone, and whatever that you were in that geographical zone, that was the guru. If you didn't want to take initiation from your zonal guru, you had to move somewhere else, practically. Otherwise, you were considered offensive by everybody else. And to me, I became very active, finally, in trying to get rid of not the gurus, but the zonal, the territorial requirement. Because after a while, the whole world was taken up. You couldn't make any new gurus because somebody had to give off part of their territory. And then it was becoming the individual guru zones were more unified than ISKCON as a whole. And that was the problem, as far as I and some other people. So we had the so-called guru reform movement. I mean, some gurus had fallen down, that was another thing. But the system itself, to me, was going to tear the movement apart. Because sometimes gurus didn't get along with each other, and one guru from one zone would not allow anybody to go to the other zone and things. So you could see it was going to fall apart. And so that's why basically the idea was that this guru reform movement was to get rid of the property requirement for being a guru. You know, this minimum thing that we wanted to make it easier to be a guru. Not because I just think that a whole bunch of people wanted to be gurus, but just to get rid of this idea of you had to have a certain territory. So that also kept the movement together. Otherwise, I think it would have split right then. And the GBC would have simply become a formality because the real power and the resources were all in the zonal acharyas. And to some extent it's still going on. Some people say they're still anyway, but that's another thing. But that was another idea to keep the GBC actually as the supreme ultimate managing authority, as Prabhupada said. But you know, one time somebody had become upset with the GBC and had gone to one of Prabhupada's godbrothers, and that godbrother had said, you know, that the people that Prabhupada had originally named to be initiating gurus, these people were not under the GBC. Because he said, how can the unfit judge the fit? That was his idea. The Prabhupada, when asked, you know, how will initiations go on, he named some people. So this senior devotee's ideas, those were the fit people. But he was one of the ones that was against the GBC with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He didn't care for it, he said. I have a tape where he was people were talking to, this is Sridhar Swami, talking to him, and he said, I didn't care for the GBC. That's what he said. Oh, anyway, so far we're together. Every year, you know, there's one thing or another, because it's very hard to have a unified Hare Krishna movement all over the world from people from all different places. And not everybody's a pure devotee. That's not to be expected. You know. And some people are good at management, but maybe not so spiritually advanced, so they do management. Bhaktisiddhanta had that, so that's what's going to happen. Yeah?
You mentioned split of groups.
The what?
Split of groups
Yeah.
from ISKCON. I haven't kind of thought of it like that before, but what are the groups then?
Who are the split of groups?
Besides the Rithik?
Yeah, they're the Ritviks. Then there's Tripurari, for example. He's got his own kind of movement. He was one of the people who was not one of the original people who were gurus, and he became very much influenced by one of Prabhupada's godbrothers, and so he has, you know, a following that it's his own following, his own kind of thing. They're pretty much preaching orthodox Krishna consciousness. They probably don't, I don't know what their practices are. You may not require 16 rounds a day or something like that, I'm not sure. But he is, you know, and there are other groups that are kind of more inclined to other members of the Gaudiya Math or other Vaishnavas. But at least active in America is Tripurari. Who else, you know?
Svarup.
Huh?
Svarup.
Yeah, so that was an early one. That happened during Prabhupada's time, actually. There was, so Svarup has got his own movement. Mostly his people are around the Pacific Ocean. So that's that group. And yeah, there are others actually. Now I think, what's that German devotee?
Another nuts.
Huh?
Palangueya.
Paramadoiti Swami, yeah, he's another one. You know. He's got his. These are not big movements, but they're independent Gaudiya Vaishnava gurus, you might say. Or to one extent or another, they've adapted Krishna consciousness. But the point of being unified is that when you are working together, you know, if 5 people go out to do something, and they're competent people, they can accomplish something. If those 5 people work together, then it's the equivalent force of maybe 15 or 20 people, just by organization. And so Prabhupada very much stressed that we should be organized, and that he wanted us to be organized. And to me, with some of these people who've gone out, their main thing is they don't really like to have an authority over them. And that's why they've really split off. But I mean, Prabhupada was just it was very high priority for him that we should be organized. If you can't get along, okay, you should still practice Krishna consciousness. That's another thing. You can be independent and still practice. He didn't say people stop practicing Krishna consciousness. I'm sure all these split off groups are probably doing good in some way or another, and maybe reach people that ISKCON doesn't reach them. But yeah, then other people became followers of Narayan Maharaj in one way or another. You know, these kind of things. So it's not horrible, but the idea of being unified, I think, was very, very, very important to Srila Prabhupada, and it should be given a very high regard. And we should keep trying to unify people if we can. We do that. The GBC does anyway.
Pulling in the comments about fault finding, would you say it's true that fault finding in its own nature is a very isolating sort of activity that isolates a person, and therefore would go against, you know, Prabhupada's desire for unification?
Yeah, it's true. That's the Prabhupada said that when you find fault with somebody, you point the finger, but there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. Because usually fault finding means there's something wrong in yourself that you don't want to recognize. So I saw early on, as my experience as a temple president, one very lustful brahmachari was always going around accusing other men of looking at women. But he was the one that was... So, like a lot of times, fault finding is autobiographical. You're really describing yourself, and what you hate about yourself, you don't want to look at, but you see it in others. So then, then when you are finding fault with other people, you're isolated, you're separated. Because this term isolation is hell. It's not that in hell there's any society. You know, even if you look at hellish societies like gangsters, they're all ready to kill each other. They have a gang together, but they're all like, at any minute they can have and it's usually somebody who's really strong who holds them all together simply by the exercise of fear, that they stay together. Fear is also isolating. There's no love. So